Hello and welcome to another episode. Today this is going to be something completely different. This is a new video series. It's something different I'm going to be doing here at the Marble Gallery because I want to talk about other things that sometimes are tied to video games, that sometimes are tied to other things and stuff. And this video series is going to be about reminiscing about the past, hence the name Memory Lane. So in this first video, I'm going to talk about video rentals. Going to video rental stores as a kid, growing up in video rental stores, experiences with them, how much I miss it, but how it's kind of a thing that's dead because of Netflix, which is both good and bad for consumers, and just overall everything about that. So for me growing up, I grew up in a very middle-class family. My parents obviously introduced me at first to the original Nintendo system. That was the first system I ever got as a kid. I want to say I was like 3 or 4. At the time. So my dad's thing was always growing up was, why do you need to buy games? You can just rent them. It's more cost effective if you just rent a game rather than buy it. So he's very anti me going out and buying games. Also, games were freaking expensive as a kid. I didn't own a lot of video games. I rented a lot of video games. I had a small collection of them, but I didn't own a lot. I rented games so frequently. For me growing up, it was a every weekend thing. That was my jam. Every weekend I would rent 2 games, and that's what we did. It was a Friday night thing. Before I started was able to ride a bike to a video store that was close enough, my mom or my dad would take me on a Friday night after school, usually my mom, and I would rent 2 games, and that was what I would do that weekend. If I had homework and stuff, I would finish the homework and I would sit there and I would play games, and that's how I played a lot of games. For me, obviously it was the original Nintendo. I did a little bit of that. And that was, we went to Blockbuster a lot, and then in my town where I lived, there was another really cool video store called Dollar Video that no longer exists. Obviously, most of these video stores no longer exist. I had a blast going there. It was a really fun video store, very just local yokel thing. It was awesome. I think I own the '89 Batman on VHS, but I didn't own Superman 2. I rented that movie, I can't even remember how many times I rented that freaking movie, but renting movies there and stuff too. We went there constantly, but I also rented games from there. We would also go to Blockbuster as well. It kind of flip-flopped on who had a better selection and obviously who had better pricing and stuff. So Blockbuster would obviously get competitive with Dollar Video, and they would, obviously Dollar Video is called Dollar Video for a reason. And in the end, the name is kind of what killed that video store. I digress. So, where I originally lived, which is where I live now, I lived here from when I was born until I just finished 5th grade when I moved from where I currently live down to southern Illinois. I live in the state of Illinois, where I moved down southern Illinois for 3 years, and then I lived in suburbs of Detroit for 3 years. I never had the experience of riding my bike to the video store until I lived in southern Illinois. That's when I was introduced to a fantastic video rentals chain that still exists, and if you have one close to you, I strongly urge you to use it because I would really hate to see them die, and that is Family Video. Family Video is fantastic. They're an excellent video store that I've always enjoyed supporting over the years. Very high memories of going there, and still I'm lucky enough to live in a town next to a town that has one that recently opened up. Unfortunately, it's just a little too far for me to drive to rent things consistently from, so I don't. But once every, I would say, season, so spring, winter, fall, summer, I will pop in there and I will pick up previously viewed Blu-rays. That's kind of the only way I buy Blu-rays anymore. I used to be a real big Blu-ray purchase guy. I kind of have stopped. That's the only way I really buy Blu-rays anymore, unless a movie has really captured me or something that I feel like, hey, I need to own this. I don't really buy Blu-rays anymore. Family Video. Incredible store. Probably my most fond video renting memories are from this Family Video where I lived in southern Illinois. What I would do in the warmer months, I would hop on my bike, and it was at the tip of my neighborhood, which made it even that much better. So on a Friday night through the summer, I would hop on my bike, I would pedal my bike there, I would rent my 2 games or whatever. And this was even before they really gave a shit about ratings on games. They wouldn't really ask you. And then it was kind of thing where once they finally came down, hey, we need to start asking, you know, kids that come in here like, hey, we probably shouldn't rent them Mortal Kombat or something. It was a kind of thing where they could, you could have a parent or guardian put a note on the account. Essentially, it was like, hey, I don't give a shit if my kid rents this, and that's what happened to me. So that was never an issue for me growing up. I would ride my bike there every weekend, and until it was winter, and then I would obviously get a ride there, or one of my parents would take me. But I was constantly renting games. One of my favorite memories of renting a game from Family Video, and they were always pretty lenient with me. There were definitely a couple times I rented a game, got home, was like, this game sucks, and I would bring it back and tell them, and they would let me pick something else because they didn't really care. My favorite memory of anything was I pedaled my bike there. A diehard Resident Evil fan, always have been my entire life, always will be. So it was a spring day. I can't remember when exactly. I got on my bike. It was after school. It could have been the summer. I'd honestly have to look up this game, find out when its release date was in America, and then find out exactly when this was. In fact, I'm gonna fact check it right now. All right, so after fact checking that, the game came out August 30th. The game in question here is Resident Evil Survivor, which in Japan was called Resident Evil Gun Survivor because it was a light gun game. When the game was released here in North America, it did not have light gun support, and they removed gun from the name. So it is literally a first-person shooter, but like in the sense that it is a light gun game, but it doesn't have gun support. So you're just moving a cursor around on the screen, which is a shitty way to play a game. Secondly, it has no ability to save. So what happened for me was I was super excited, obviously, another Resident Evil game. Why wouldn't I be excited? So I got on my bike, I pedaled to the store and everything, get to the store, rent that. I rented another game because I always rented 2 games. I don't remember what the other game was. Get back home, obviously, first game I'm going to play is Resident Evil. I freaking love it. So I pop it in, load up the game. I actively did not like the game, but I played it for like 2 hours. The whole time I was like, this game's not good, man. This isn't Resident Evil. And I get to a point where you literally have a typewriter in the game that you can save. Can't save the game. Can't save the game at all. Even though it gives me the ability and the option in this game to show that, hey, you can save your progress, you can't actually save your progress. At this point, I'm like, this game's broken. I can't even play it. So I hop back on my bike, ride back to Family Video. I go in, I tell the nice lady, hey, like, explain my situation. Like, I can't even save this game. And she's like, all right, fine, whatever. Just pick out your other game. Like, pick out a different game. I don't care. And I'm pretty sure they actually defected that game and sent it back. Like, I never saw it on the shelf again. Honestly, I don't remember what the other game I rented was. But the kind of thing where I wish I took pictures of this game, of their video game section back in 99, 2000, and was able to post it on here because, man, holy shit, how awesome it was. It was like you would walk into a room, and I'm gonna try and find a picture of this to put in this video so it gives you a sense. But you would walk into this room, and they still have these rooms to this day. The local Family Video that's in the town over from me has a video game room like this, and just it is a room that is surrounded on the walls of games, and then there are a couple aisles of games too. Just imagine this in 1999, 2000. The entire outer wall is just all PS1 games, and then the inner aisles are all Nintendo 64 games. And as me as a kid at this time who owned both, was just like walking into the gates of heaven essentially every weekend. So for me, my thing was I rented a ton of RPGs during this time. PS1 is actually where I fell in love with RPGs, with Final Fantasy VII and stuff like that. But I rented all those games like Wild Arms, and Wild Arms is the first one that comes to my mind. Vagrant Story. But all those RPGs I rented. I never really owned them. Legend of Dragoon, that's another good one. Never finished any of them really, but I rented them all and tried them at one point. Shit, and other things that weren't RPGs. Obviously, I was a huge survival horror fan, so I had rented all the Resident Evils multiple times. Resident Evil 1, the PS1 version, as a kid, I never finished it. I didn't really fall in love with that one until the GameCube remake. Resident Evil 2 was where I really jumped in and loved the story and loved that game to death. And then obviously Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was huge for me. And shit, like Resident Evil Code Veronica, but like just a ton of games and stuff. And were rented. Just awesome memories of that store. And one of my other favorite memories of that store was it's not a pleasant memory, I guess I would say, but it's a memory nonetheless. So I had a couple friends that lived in a different subdivision from me. So, and this family video happened to be on the way. So I was pedaling my bike to go over to this kid's house, and right in front of the family video was like on this side of the street, then obviously the street, other side of the street was kind of like a construction area essentially. And what happened was I kind of flipped my bike. I hit like this hill going downwards and flipped off of my bike. And what happened was my bike came back down. I didn't have plastic covering over the gear part of the bike. So what happened was that spiky stuff went right into my calf. Not deep enough that I needed stitches, but deep enough that it bled pretty badly. I was lucky I didn't have to have stitches or anything like that. So I literally I'm all bloodied, like all bloodied, probably crying. Carry my bike across the street over to family video, and I had literally had to use their phone to call my mom, be like, hey, I just was in a bike accident, you need to come get me, kind of a thing. And obviously she came down and did, but that's another memory I have of that. It's not a pleasant memory, I guess, but it's another memory, because my thing was those people are always super friendly and helpful to me. And then I was lucky enough that when I moved to suburbs of Detroit, Michigan for a couple years, at the very edge of that neighborhood I lived in too, granted, the neighborhood I lived in there was much larger than the neighborhood I lived in when I lived in Southern Illinois. Also had a family video, and it was that family video was on the edge of like, it's just a little too far to ride your bike, but I would do it anyways until I was old enough that I had buddies that were driving and stuff, and then obviously I was driving, and then you would just drive there, obviously. But I got a couple more good years out of riding my bike to that family video as well during the nicer months. But the one thing you have to learn, and anybody that lives in Michigan, is the weather sucks in Michigan horribly bad. So not as much bike riding as I did in Southern Illinois. Again, Blockbuster was always a thing that was around too. Blockbuster to me was always the Walmart of video rentals. Like, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but as a kid, one of my dreams was always to work in a video store. It never happened for me. Obviously, as a kid, you're not thinking about making money or how much money you're making. You're thinking about the job. So for me, it was always a dream of mine to either work at a video game store or a video rental store. And the video rental store thing never happened for me, unfortunately. And it's a shame, because I think I would have had a lot of fun with that. Another thing that I would say about when I lived in Southern Illinois, this wasn't really a thing when I lived in Michigan, but it was in Southern Illinois, is there was a grocery store that my mom shopped at every week called Chinooks. Chinooks was an awesome grocery store, but the thing that was really cool about it was in the front of it, it had a video store. And this was a common practice in a lot of grocery stores in the 80s and the 90s. They would have dedicated areas that were video stores, and this one did. And I rented games and movies from this video store too, and I always thought it was really cool. I remember renting 2 games from that one specifically. I remember renting Conker's Bad Fur Day, because the weekend that game came out, it was out everywhere. Like, everybody was renting that game because everybody wanted to freaking play that game, because it was like the big bad game that everybody, as a kid, I was like, holy shit, I can't believe they made a Mario game essentially that's for adults. And it was the kind of thing where, like, if my mom had known what was in that game, she wouldn't have let me rent it. But the other one, I'll just combine into one thing, was Dreamcast games. So for me, and this, again, memory lane, this episode's all about video rentals, but I'll kind of tell the tale here. For me in the Dreamcast, I'll give you my short tale of the Dreamcast, and I'll probably prolong that into a different video at some point if I ever do memory lane videos about getting certain systems. Dreamcast for me, I didn't really care about it when it came out. I had just gotten a the Dreamcast came out in '99. I got my PS1 very tail end of '97, beginning of '98. So I'd had the PS1 for like a year and a half. Obviously, I had my 64 since like a month after launch. So I was big on those two systems. Didn't really care about the Dreamcast. It did nothing for me. I looked at it, I was like, whatever. Because I never, as a kid and as an adult, I don't give a shit about sports. I've never been a sports guy. If I had to pick one sport, I would say it's hockey. Like those 2K sports games, I didn't care about those. Those games didn't interest me at all whatsoever. The House of the Dead game looked cool, but I wasn't getting that either. There were games that looked interesting to me, but I wasn't like hepped on the system. And what happened was, I had a buddy named, his parents had just gone through a divorce. And it was kind of that divorced kid situation where each parent was trying to outdo the other one. His dad had bought him a Dreamcast because it just came out. I was like, here's a new game system. The kid will love this, kind of a thing. I'll one up, the ex-wife kind of a thing. He got a Dreamcast, and he invited me over. and we sit down, we play the Dreamcast, and it's cool. Like, I actually really liked it. We played. He had obviously the NFL 2K game. Didn't really give a shit about that, but it looked like graphically it looked really impressive. And then he had the House of the Dead, and we played that. I really liked it. So at that point, I was into the Dreamcast, but there wasn't that one game that I really needed to have. And then it freaking happened. Resident Evil Code Veronica was announced, and it was announced as a Sega Dreamcast exclusive game. I wanted a Dreamcast so bad. So I saved up the entire summer of 2000, just mowing my lawn, mowing a neighbor's lawn, washing cars, like anything I could. And I saved up this money, bought the Dreamcast, finally got the Dreamcast at a mom and pop store. And the funny thing about the situation was, it was kind of a situation where it was like, yeah, the Dreamcast seemed like it was kind of on its way out, which again, everybody knows. Anybody will tell you the Dreamcast is one of the most underappreciated systems ever. It is a fantastic system. I love that system to death, but it did not get the credit that it deserves. It was a local store. It's also the same local store that I bought Castlevania Symphony of the Night for PS1. So I bought my Dreamcast for like $80, and I needed, obviously it came with the system. It was one of those, it was a local, like, it was a pre-owned system, so it was like shrink wrapped weird, and then it came with one of the little VMU units. And my deal with my dad was, if you pay for the system, I'll buy you a game. And it could be any game from like whatever the retail price is down. So obviously, what's the one freaking game I want? Code Veronica. So I got Code Veronica. At the time, Code Veronica had been out for probably 6-7 months, so it wasn't expensive. It was like $20. So at this point, he's like, you can get 2 games if you want, as long as they're, you know, the same price, because I think Code Veronica was like $20. So I got Code Veronica and I got Crazy Taxi, and then I had this Dreamcast, so I wanted to start renting games for the Dreamcast. And Dollar Video didn't have, and this is where this is gonna wrap back around. Dollar Video didn't have games for the Dreamcast, so I had to go and rent games from Chinooks, because oddly enough, the grocery store video store had Dreamcast games, so I had to rent games from there. So I rented a lot of Dreamcast games from there. In fact, I even rented, they made ports of the first 2 GTAs, I believe, on the Dreamcast. I played those. Those were a lot of fun too. So there were a lot of fun things that I rented for this system. I had a lot of fun, and then obviously when I moved to Michigan, that's when I discovered the online functionality of the Dreamcast, and that was my first kind of foray into online gaming, because my family didn't have a good, powerful PC until about 2002. Enough rambling about the Dreamcast, that's not what this video is about. That was Chinooks, and that was their video store. Another video store that I really have a lot of fond memories for, that no longer exists, again, most of these places don't exist anymore, was a local video store where my grandmother lived in southern Illinois called Jay's Video. What was cool about it was the owners actually lived on the same street as my grandma. My grandma lived at the bottom of a street that was an extremely steep hill. I rode a bike down it today, I would be scared out of my mind. Kind of steep, like it's steep. During the summer, I would stay with her like like June, July, August, I would probably stay with her once a week, like a week out of every month of the summer, because my parents would go on vacations with just them, and they would leave me there, and it was like a vacation with my grandma, essentially. My grandpa died in '93, so it was just me and my grandma. I would walk to that video store myself. She would give me money, say, hey, go rent some tapes. I would go, and she'd give me like $5. I'd go rent a bunch of tapes. That's how I watched a lot of old video WWE pay-per-views and stuff, and WCW pay-per-views like Bash at the Beach and stuff. I would rent movies from there too. They had video games. They had kind of a cool little video game room that kind of reminds me of the family video game room, but not as big, obviously. My grandma was anti-video games in her house. Like, not because she hated me playing them, but because she was afraid that they were going to break her TV. So up until maybe the last year and a half that she was alive, she would not let me use any like Super Nintendo 64, PS1. She wouldn't let me bring those and play them on there. I believe like the last year and a half that she was alive, I started just bringing my own TV, a 19-inch TV, and I would set it up in a different room in her house. And then I would go and rent games from this place, and they had a lot of cool games. That's where I first played Colony Wars, because for some reason the video stores where I lived didn't have Colony Wars. That's where I played some, and I would rent games from there too, and it was really cool. I had a lot of fun with that too. That was a really cool and fun video store, but I had a lot of fond memories of during the summer just walking up to that video store and walking back, and getting my grandma like, here's $5, go rent a bunch of stuff, because I think the videos were like 50 cents a day or something. Like, it was something absurdly cheap that you would laugh at now. Obviously, I lived in Michigan for 3 years in the suburbs of Detroit. I went to, obviously there was a Family Video there. Wasn't really any local video stores where I lived, and then there was also Blockbuster. And again, I don't have a hatred for Blockbuster, don't get me wrong. Blockbuster was really good for that business, and they were kind of like the Walmart, essentially, of video rentals. But they were a good video rental store, and I rented a lot of stuff from Blockbuster as well over the years. Until they really started to get outrageous with their prices. And then finally, to wrap up, you know, this first episode of Memory Lane, as I've been talking about video rental stores and the fun of them, when I moved back to the town that I currently live in, that I originally grew up in, I went back to Dollar Video and Blockbuster for a little while. Unfortunately, they have fizzled out and ceased to exist. But in recent years, a Family Video has opened up in the town next to me, which as I said previously in this video, I go to seldom, but it's just a little too far for me to rent stuff from. It's a shame, because I would love to support them more, but they're just a little too far for me to make it viable. I went back to Dollar Video, supported them for a couple of years through the end of high school and through like my first year of college, and then they fizzled out, and I want to say in like 2008, so about almost 10 years ago. And then Blockbuster hung around until I want to say in my town like 2011. They were gone too. Blockbuster did a cool thing before I had Netflix. Before we jump into the Netflix thing, Blockbuster had a mail rental service too. But what was cool about that was you could rent like an older movie from their thing, and then you would when you would return it to the Blockbuster store, you could mail it back too. But if you returned it to the Blockbuster store, it actually doubled as a coupon for 2-night rental of any movie. And I did that for like a year. And then they just kept raising the price of this program to the point where it was like $35 a month or something absurd, where I was like, I'm out. That's way too much money. I'm not watching a lot of these movies at this point. So it just wasn't viable anymore. And then Blockbuster ceased to exist, and we've been overtaken by Netflix and Redbox. Netflix I don't really have a problem with. I actually like the service. I think it's cool, and in a digital age, it totally makes sense. And I don't like Redbox. I've used it a couple times, but the problem I have with the Redbox is it is like having a video store, but it's right there, and that's it. I miss the feeling of walking into a video store and being lost. For me, like, one of the reasons I would ride my bike to the video store so often, my parents would go, is I was notorious for spending hours trying to make a decision on what to rent. And I remember one time specifically, I went to visit, after I'd moved back here, I went to go visit some of my friends in Michigan, and we went to go to the Family Video there, and I spent like an hour and a half at least just trying to figure out what are we gonna rent, like, and it wasn't even a game, it was a movie. And I'm notorious for just spending way too much time at a video store trying to decide those kind of things. But I miss it. I miss the feel of walking into a video store and looking through everything and trying to and deciding what you want to see. I mean, yeah, you can still do that on Netflix, but it's not the same. It's never going to be the same. And that's why I have massive respect that something like Family Video can still exist in 2017. You know, even around Netflix and Hulu and some of these other digital distribution services that aren't bad. They just aren't what they were. But I have no respect for Redbox. It's not my thing. I just don't like it. It's not the same. Anyways, the point of this whole video is I miss video rental stores a hell of a lot. They're awesome. They're so much fun. There's so much fun to be had going to one. If you have one near you, please support it. Please go to it. It's a dying thing. Even Family Video, like, I'm sure they're cleaning on at some point. And there are areas, don't get me wrong, there are areas of this country that have terrible internet, so video rental stores make perfect sense. In fact, there are still Blockbusters that exist in some areas. But please go. Please support them, if you can, because it's something that isn't going to be around forever. And when it's gone, it's gone. They're not coming back. But I love them. I miss them. Hopefully you enjoyed sitting here reminiscing and hear me rambling about video rental stores for, 20 minutes here. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And anyways, until next time.